Lu, você concorda com a posição do Rothbard sobre bombas atômicas, de que elas seriam ilegítimas porque não servem a propósitos defensivos individuais? E como os Estados Unidos deveriam agir no caso do programa nuclear iraniano?
Well, my own position on the atomic bomb is that, and I believe this was Rothbard's position, is not that it's just an offensive weapon. Obviously, any weapon can be offensive or defensive, right? I mean, a rifle can be a weapon of offense or defense. But the atomic bomb is a specific anti-civilian device, at least when he was talking about it. Now they've got smaller ones, which they have very unfortunate development too, but the atomic bomb was designed to blow up cities. Well, that's by itself inherently immoral and a war crime. The earlier Geneva Conventions, one of the war crimes was bombing a city from the air with anything, let alone an atomic bomb. So I think whether we look at things from the standpoint of religion or Rothbardian natural rights, I mean, atomic weapons are a real problem. I don't believe that Iran has a nuclear program in the sense that U.S. propaganda is holding it up as. If you remember, it's the exact same stuff we heard about Iraq. Oh, Saddam Hussein's going to get an atomic bomb. He's going to do this and that. It was all, of course, these are just lies for war. I suppose maybe a country has told the truth about a war it wanted to fight at some point. I'm trying to think of an example. I can't think of one, but I don't rule out such a thing as. But I don't think that. I think the U.S. and Israel are aggressors against Iran, certainly continuing to threaten attacks against them, which by itself is a war crime, and very, very unfortunate. If, my guess is Iran does not have an atomic weapon. If they wanted an atomic weapon, one or whatever, why would they want that? To send it to Israel or New York or whatever? They couldn't send it to New York, but in order to be turned into molten glass, the entire country? No, they wanted to prevent the U.S. from being able to attack them. It would be a defensive. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing that they would have it. I'm not for anybody having atomic weapons, not the U.S., not Israel, not Britain, China, Russia, anybody. But if somebody like Iran wanted one, and lots of other countries, we know in Brazil too there's been talk of this, and the U.S. threatening Brazil not to develop an atomic weapon. Why does Brazil want an atomic weapon in order to bomb Paraguay? Well, maybe over the smuggled cigarettes, right? No, I'm sure not. It would only be because it would be, in effect, as a defensive weapon. Again, I don't think it's a good thing, but when you have a world empire like the U.S. that seeks to be the world government, that seeks to rule every place, has its troops every place, wants its troops more and more places, and wants to be able to be the global authority, and can threaten, as Obama just said, that he's going to have a new nuclear doctrine where he's not going to, he's going to agree the U.S. won't have a first use of nuclear weapons against any non-nuclear power unless he decides that they shouldn't be in that category. So if they're not cooperating with the U.S., then he says that the U.S. can nuke them. It's a war crime. You can't actually, whether we look at St. Augustine or every other theologian or moral thinker who's ever looked at this, you can't just bomb women and children and cities and destroy people's entire civilization over some government demand. It's just both crazy and evil. So I think if the U.S. weren't threatening to do things to Iran, if the U.S. in fact weren't committing war crimes against Iran at the very moment by denying free trade with Iran, there are vicious sanctions on Iran. They want to step it up. They want to, for example, deny all gasoline imports. That's the next thing. And the justification is they want to do so much damage to the civilian population that they'll overthrow the government. Well, you're not actually allowed morally to do something evil so that something good allegedly may come of it. You can't, it's sort of not allowed. So I think that U.S. should have nothing to do with Iran, should mind its own business. If I had my way, Obama would bring all the troops home. And Ron Paul always says if you actually want to cut the budget, which of course has to be drastically done, you don't raise taxes. you bring the troops home, bring all the clothes, all the bases, saves more than $1 trillion a year right away. So that would be a very good step. I was just going to mention something that Tom Woods said in his speech when he was talking about what an actual, what a fiscal stimulus might be. Ron Paul had a great point. He said he's not for the government having any kind of fiscal stimulus, but if they wanted to have one, he said rather than bail out all the banks for less money than that, they could have given every single American a 1-year reprieve from all federal taxes. He said at least that would allow, he said it's still not a good use of printing press money, but nevertheless, maybe that would have been an actual stimulus. Certainly morally, it would have been a good thing to allow people to keep their own incomes for a year, and then maybe they would be unhappy at giving them away again when the year was up. So anyway, I don't believe that Iran is Hitler. I don't believe that Ahmadinejad is Hitler. Of course, he's a crazy Keynesian, so there's much wrong with him. He's done terrible things into the economy of Iran and terrible inflationist and many, many things wrong with him. He's not Hitler. And this whole propaganda campaign that's being ginned up is for conquest. The U.S. wants to control all the oil in the Middle East, not so much that it can get it cheap for American citizens, they couldn't care less about us, but so it can deny it to other countries if it needs to for power reasons. So they can deny China, Russia, Brazil for that matter, any other country. If they're not obeying, then they can be denied.
Vamos para a última pergunta. O que é mais importante para o avanço da liberdade? A difusão da ciência econômica ou a difusão da ideia de direitos naturais?
Well, I guess I would say that spreading economic science is the most important. I don't know whether there actually are natural rights in my own view in the sense that it's normally said. I tend to think with Rothbard that everything is property rights. It extends from your property and yourself and your justly acquired property outside your body, and that you have a right to free speech on your property, and you have a right to free speech on somebody else's property if you've contracted with them or they allow you to have it. But you don't have like a free-floating right to free speech that you can exercise at the mall or in the lobby of this hotel, or in your next-door neighbor's front yard. You don't have such a thing. But I think it's important. But sort of the basis, in one sense, of sound economics is property rights. So I think that the two, I would say the two go together. But I think economics is more important than, say, a theory of natural rights. But I don't think they're at all contradictory. I think it's possible to be working in all sorts of areas, and some people, right, this is a great diverse movement. Some people work in one, others in other areas. And different people will be appealed to by different approaches. So we need people doing every sort of thing, whether it's in Brazil or every other country, to advance the idea that, if I can put it baldly, that the state is our enemy on earth, that it's the enemy of mankind, the secular enemy of mankind anyway, that it is a parasite, that it starts wars, it kills people, it steals, kidnaps. Of course, it calls it the draft, or it calls it taxes, it calls it war, doesn't call it murder, looting, and kidnapping, and all the rest of the things it does. So I think but on the other hand, if we're talking about from a libertarian standpoint, probably the most important thing, I was like Stephan Kinsella's formulation, that all it takes to be an anarchist is to think that you don't have the right, and no one has the right, to initiate aggression against an innocent person, to initiate force against the innocent, that it's not, or to threaten the initiation of force. If you agree that that's wrong, then you're an anarchist. By the way, that doesn't mean that you think an anarchist society could ever come about. It doesn't mean you know how things would work or any of those kinds of questions. But you just think that the fundamental instrument of government, which is the gun at your head or the knife at your belly or whatever, ordering you to do things, And even though you've done nothing wrong, we're not talking about criminals. Maybe we're talking about public criminals. But anyway, I just say there's room, there's room for many, many different approaches. Let 100 flowers bloom. What was Mao Zedong said? Let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let 100 schools of thought contend. So I actually mean it, unlike Mao. But I think certainly within libertarianism, there's room for not only all the old approaches, new ideas. I think it's great to have, David Friedman saying what he says, and there's just let everybody make their best argument for human freedom. It's the most important thing we can do.
Tem mais uma pergunta aqui na plateia.
Oi, boa tarde, Lew. A primeira pergunta é sobre a reforma do sistema financeiro americano, do senador Dodd. Queria saber qual das duas propostas que é mais propícia ao fim do Fed. Se é a proposta republicana de concentrar poder no Fed, ou se é a democrata de criar várias agências e mais burocracia e descentralização de poder mesmo.
Is there a difference? I mean, the Republicans guy was Greenspan. Also, Bernanke's the Republican guy. Maybe the Democrats, if you look back to Paul Volcker, who was the last time that there was an actual cut in the money supply and actually stopped inflation for a time. In one case, the Democrats did better, but I don't really think there's any difference. There's a difference in the interest groups that they service sometimes. There's a difference in the rhetoric they use, but I agree with Butler Schaefer that they're just two wings of the same bird of prey, the Republicans and the Democrats. The Republicans have better rhetoric in some ways, but if we look at the Bush administration's 8 years, pretty bad, although there's Roger Garrison who says that sooner or later every American president makes you nostalgic for his predecessor. So I'm already missing Bush. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying that. And probably someday I'll miss Obama. Yeah.